Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Carnival Row Season 2, Episode 6. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with the Imogen and Agreus side of things. Imogen has to try and convince Agreus that, right, this place is somewhere we can be free. But for him, it's it's a pill he refuses to swallow. Understandably, considering everything that's going down, what he's witnessed. Once again, I think that's such a beautiful element. Yeah, she's seen some of the ugliness, but she's seen more beauty than ugly. Whereas Agreus has only seen the ugly, and he sees any of the quote unquote beauty that Imogen sees. He sees it as just a facade, a lie. So them kind of having to come to terms with both sides of things, because Imogen's right, if you don't fall in line, Leonora will have you killed. And it's oh, and you're keeping that from me? She was to protect you. So it's oh, you're lying to me now. She's just like you told me the people from the ship were okay, wasn't that to protect me? At the end of the day, it's right, are you legitimately happy here? And for her, it's happy's not really this right word, but for so long and I love that it's so poetically said that she has been a spoiled brat in a cage, and she's finally free from that cage. She's not that same person she was before Agreus came into her life. She's grown, she's expanded. She sees kind of the person that Leonora is, and I think it is kind of inspiring in her regard. But it's right, here we can define who we are. We get to be us, no judgment. I get to choose what I want from my life, because so much of her life was chosen for her. Because for one, it's it's the same conversations and the same fight that Sophie was fighting. It's right, I will always be a woman. I will always have these bars in front of me that I'm being chastised for being the one who can see the bars. Sophie's eyes were open, and now Imogen's eyes are open to the position that she was put in. It's oh, you're a woman, kind of know your place. So much was dictated for her, because her life was oh, yes, this and that, and her brother was the man in the household. That ends up coming up in this episode. We'll get to that in a second. So for her being able to make that choice now, she has that choice now, that freedom of choice. And Agreus is what are you choosing? She's I'll choose you no matter where we are. I will choose you every time. So for her sake, he's willing to look at things this way. So he kind of plays along when they're talking to, God, I always remember the guy's name for a second, and then I forget it. Is it Vestor or something like that? It's going to bother the crap out of me. I remember it for a second, and then I immediately forget it. But the guy that's kind of hey, your chaperone who kind of keeps an eye on you. But it's hey, you really are trying to work on this? Okay, I'll believe you. And so he tells them a little bit of Leonora's story, that she got locked up 3 hard years of labor simply because she took scraps all of her master's food, any food that was left over that was going to be thrown away regardless. She ate it, and it's oh, that's a big no-no. And she was sent the 3 years hard labor, and throughout that she saw a single weed. And it's oh, and I love Agreus being oh, let me guess, she found hope. It's no, she found anger. That the fact of the matter is, all she had the right to claim, all she could hold on to was that flower. Instead of it being hope, it was actually the spark for her anger, and that would eventually lead her. And she has kind of essentially a memoir, I think, of her tales, or just her perspective on things, her doctrine to some extent, I think. Maybe you do. I'm sure from one perspective, it'd be her manifesto, I guess, would be another viewpoint of that. But when it's all said and done, he ends up, she kind of started all this, and you could tell Imogen was kind of getting sucked up into it. But I did think it was interesting, because I was oh, it seems like Imogen's buying into it, but Agreus isn't. But she says, right, it's a wonderful tale. It's beautiful. Wanting to change the world is beautiful, but dangerous, because I think for her, she's right, we're not safe here, because it is right, knowing that's what Leonora does. It's right, she's optimistic, she's hopeful, but that doesn't change the fact it's going to be dangerous. This is going to be a bloody draw out between New Dawn and the Pact, and who's to say for sure the Pact is going to win, especially knowing the Berg is backing them up. So I don't know wait, did I just say that backwards, or did I say that the right way? I sometimes get lost in my own thoughts. if I said it wrong, I'll just reiterate it and say it correctly. And if I said it right, I'm just going to reiterate it. What I meant to say, if I didn't say it correctly, was New Dawn will lose because the pact is being backed by the Berg. So if things kind of play out the way the pact hopes it will, but which Ezra did come warning them about it, but Leonora didn't buy it because I guess for her it's like the pact turning to the Berg, there's no way. So she kind of thought Ezra's story was BS. But yeah, like while they're planning their escape route, they call Agreus into a room. Leonora gives him a pistol with a single bullet, and it's like, right, I don't have time to see, like, to, change the mind of every, like, spoiled aristocrat that comes this way. She saw something in Imogen. Like, there was a little bit of, she felt kinship between them. But it's like, yeah, he came here to kidnap his sister and most likely kill you. So you have to determine whether or not he's worth sparing. And Agreus spares him, because if Agreus had his way, it would have been like, oh, I put you down. But he knows, like, right, this isn't for my sake. This isn't even for your sake. This is simply for Imogen's sake, because I love her and care about her. And regardless of her feelings toward you, you are her brother. And even when the time came, Imogen was so pissed at him because it's like, once again, it's like, I'm the man of the family. I'm responsible. Oh, you're not acting ladylike. You're kind of bringing shame upon the family. It's me here to rectify that. And she's like, oh, it makes you feel like a big, strong man, doesn't? He's like, no, it's not like that. But it's not even about that. In his mind, he's justified. But like, I'm course correcting his family. It's like, to be fair, you're the one that kind of like squandered your family's fortune and stuff, because he's the one that had the venture that led to Vignette getting here in the first place, and that ship got swept up in the storm, and like his family he lost everything of his family they had invested in it. So it's kind of started with him. It's not like he's done the best to keep up the family's legacy, but in his mind, it's like, right, what you've done, because of the hate that they've grown up with, their very narrow view of things, he views it as a thing of, oh yeah, like, you bring the greatest shame upon us. It's like, you've lost what it means to be ladylike, you and that animal. And I love Imogen goes over and smacks him. It's like, you better be glad it was Agreus with that gun, because if it was me, I would have shot you. And so when it's time, she's like, we're not going to leave with him. But Agreus is like, if you do, you'll regret it. And you'll be upset with me for not stopping, for letting you leave him behind. Because regardless of it all, that is your brother. Regardless of it, you do love him. Even nightmares aside of him coming after you, you still love him. So Agreus is like, cool. Are you going to stay with us, or are you actually going to escape with us? Because if you escape with us, you better not fuck this up, because Imogen will die. I was kind of hoping he'd stack on the end. It was, and if she dies before I die, I will make sure I kill you with my bare hands if something happens to Imogen. So it's like, I can't really trust him because he's the opportunist that he is. I mean, like, let's not even, like, mince words. Like, Agreus knows, like, oh, you were coming to kill me, so I definitely need to keep an eye on your ass. He still doesn't know that Ezra killed his servant, so... Was it Fergus? Was that guy's name that Ezra stabbed? Not last episode, but episode 4. So we'll have to wait to see where things kind of go on that front. They're supposed to be like leaving that day, because it's like, yeah, the next ship, it might be weeks, and we're gonna have to stay below like deck for like weeks to kind of get. Is it gonna be that simple? I don't know. I think a lot of this pact stuff versus the pact is probably going to end up. They're probably going to get swept up in all of that. That would be the most opportune time to escape, but it's also like probably the most dangerous, because it's like, yeah, there's a war between the Pact and New Dawn, but the Pact will see you as kind of like, oh, you need to be wiped out. So that's going to be an interesting thing to see how that plays out. But the other side of the episode has us back in the Berg. We're picking up in the aftermath of Jonah's death, which I told you, like, that tripped me out. That not only Sophie, but even Jonah died. I wasn't expecting a twofer in that episode. I mean, granted, it was a lot more than just them, but still. Sadly poetic. Especially, once again, Jonah dying, like, right next to Sophie's severed head. But either way, Philo is getting interrogated. I'm skipping over it, actually, because we actually got a flashback to, like, after the whole fall of Tyrannok. situation, and him, and luckily, well, he gave an opening for Darius to get away, but in that time, he ends up getting saved by the creature. Because last episode, I had my whole theory about what that creature was. It's pointless now because now we know what it is. Like, my theory, completely throw it out the window because it's not true. Multiple things in the episode trying to prove that. Well, first and foremost, we find out this creature is already a pre-existing creature known as a Sparus. But also something else came up later on, showcasing like, oh yeah, that thing I thought was kind of maybe the Sparus. No, it's still where it is. Once again, my theory was kind of irrelevant. I don't care. I haven't edited that episode yet, but I'm going to keep that in just because that's what this is. Just me spitballing ideas and stuff. So either way, knowing Philo has a connection to this thing was interesting because it came down and then it shifted. And I thought like, wait, is it going to look like something Philo would know? But apparently they're shapeshifters. So I guess it chose that form to communicate with them because maybe that's the only way they can talk human language is if they turn into a more humanoid form. But apparently these creatures are extremely rare, that to the point people think that they're gone. But it's like, yeah, they hate humans, but she let this particular Sparus let Philo go because he's part Fae. Which now I kind of go, wait, so what's going on there? Because that's where we get to the rub of it all. Because that's why I was confused. I was like, wait, you hate humans and you'll do anything to save the Fae? Because I didn't even think to ask last episode, how the hell did all those Fae get away? Like, who got out of their prison cells? Apparently it was the Sparix that did that. But it's like, if that's the case, well, we know that, yes, you're responsible for killing that guard, sure. And you ended up killing all these humans and setting the Fae free. But why go after Dahlia and her right-hand dude? Because they were Fae. Like, once again, that plays into like something Barracks brought up later on that I brought up too, but we'll talk about it when we get there. But it's like, then if that's the case, why kill two Fae and make it look like humans did it? You know, that's the big rub of it all. So maybe that's kind of a necessary evil, but why go through that? We end up finding out, sadly, that the forest that the Sparus lived in, whatever remained of them, was wiped out and destroyed. In fact, burned by Philo because he gave the orders, because he was given the orders. And it's like, right, you kind of have no choice but to follow orders. That's just how the army works. You might not always agree with it. He even put out his objection, and it was written in the report. He was making sure, like, yeah, I want it written in a report. I don't agree with this. I think it's actually a bad idea to do this. He was the one suggesting they actually work with the Sparus to, like, fight back against the Pat. But it's like, no, that thing's most likely to kill our men, too, because it's not going to work with humans. I mean, yes, it let Philo go. If it was going to let anyone live, it would most likely be Philo and Darius, because he's a Merrick now, so... Which at this point, no one knows about him being a Merrick, so I wonder how long... It probably wasn't until they got back home and he transformed on like a full moon. It's when people found out, probably. Might have been beforehand. Either way. But Philo didn't agree with it, but still they burned the forest. We only saw like a few fly out of there. I think at any point on screen, we only saw like 3. They were on fire and in the air. So now it's like, right, this Sparus has to be a survivor from that situation, right? Because the whole point was, tactically, it was meant to prevent the pack from closing in so they could get back and kind of retreat and kind of make sure no one else kind of gets flanked and overrun by like the 10,000 soldiers that were on their way, because they were kind of backed into a corner. So it was meant to be used from a tactical standpoint. If I'm not mistaken, isn't that what Napoleon did? Didn't he have that tactic of like burning all the forest and stuff like that? Or was it the people who was fighting Napoleon did that? I really don't remember how that worked. Cause wasn't it like during the winter and stuff like that? I don't remember if that, like I said, I don't remember. My world history is garbage. Like, my knowledge of world history is garbage. I don't know. There was something with Napoleon and burning woods, like forests, just to kind of slow someone down. Like I said, I don't remember if that was a tactic he used or it was a tactic used against him. I'm sure, like, from a military standing point strategically, like if you have to make a retreat or just statistically, I keep thinking it might have been used against, because I know the point was like it was winter time, and I think the whole point was to kind of back them into a corner and make them run out of resources, like drag it out long enough into like it turned it into literally that's one of the prime examples of history of a battle of attrition. You know, try to see if you can last longer than they can. I might be getting all the facts wrong with that. Either way, it's kind of irrelevant, but it's just like that just, once again, don't agree with it, but from a tactical standpoint, it makes sense why you would do it. Doesn't make it any less sucky. And so it could be especially because this episode's called Original Sins, which I think it's more so in Philo's case rather than but I also feel like that whole thing led to the Sparrows being here now slaughtering people. So, but Philo's getting blamed for being a part of it. Yeah, people saw the Sparrows was the one that did it, but it's like, yeah, you happen to break into the prison at the same time and the Chancellor getting killed, yada yada, so on and so forth. So he's getting tortured. Barrack and Dombey show up trying to cut Philo some slack, but then the warden's like, oh, he tried to spare some Sparrows back in the day. He was willing to go against his military orders trying to save them. So it's like, yeah, the fact is Philo has a connection with the Sparrows in some regard. It's like, yeah, might have had his objections, but he still burnt down the forest. Nothing from Philo that, says he's done anything anti-human or do anything like this, because regardless of it all, it's like, I was about to say that's his half-brother. It's like, no, I keep saying like half-brother, but it's like, half stepbrother, not even half stepbrother, but just like his stepbrother because they didn't even have the same dad, obviously not the same mom. But yeah, they were brothers in a certain regard, but once again, no one knows that. The only other living people who know that is Darius, Vignette. Once again, I don't remember if Vignette knows that or not. I know he told her about his father and stuff like that, but I don't know if he had figured it out at the time that Absalom was his... I don't remember now off the top of my head, but I know he told Darius this season, and obviously Millworthy knows, but they're the only ones who know the truth, and probably bringing that up now, it makes you look even more suspicious because like, oh, you were trying to remove him from the equation, yada, 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 so on and so forth. But my point was like, he hadn't done anything in 7 years, so what makes you think? But it's like, right, that's before he was hiding amongst humans. They could make the argument, oh, he was planning, he was waiting, because, he's a Critch, blah, he's part Critch, blah, blah, well, not even part Critch. For them, it's like, oh, you were half Critch, it makes you full Critch in their mind, so that's the whole point. So, obviously for Philo, there's no winning, so, and while he's in the prison cell, he's like, I think his guilt over everything, especially because it feels like the past is coming back to haunt him. The argument it still did in season 1, but even more so, in this regard, one of the things he regrets doing the most is coming back to bite him. And it's like, yeah, maybe if you had admitted what you were as a Fae, then maybe the Sparrows would have been spared. But it's like, I don't think so. He would be dead if not locked up, but most likely dead. And that what happened still would have went down. It still would have happened regardless of him. But it says maybe the thought was hey, if you admitted what you were, maybe you could have been more convincing of hey, we could use the Sparrows to our advantage. But but that's what his guilty conscience is trying to get at him. Which part of me wonders is there more to that? Is that just Philo from taking blows to the head and just all those blows he's taking? But or is that just his guilty conscience, or is it something else? Is it something only he can see, but there's more to it? That's kind of a purposeful situation, someone's doing that to manipulate him. But it's yeah, the more you help the police, the more you're hurting the Fae. Every time you try, because he tries to do this balancing act where he's trying to help out both, because he's thinking by helping the police, by helping the humans, he can alleviate some of that pressure that's being put on the Fae. So he is trying to help the Fae by helping the humans, but it's the other side of him is yo, the more you help the police, the more you're hurting the Fae. And that's hiding. You're hiding, because continuously the point keeps being made. He's not embracing being the Fae he is. Even though he's part Fae, he knows it, but he's not fully embraced being a Fae. He just mainly has always embraced being a human. It's the tough thing about having lived that life for so long, having beaten into him, because he was even saying oh yeah, the father from the orphanage, it's he knew the truth about your circumstances, but all about the purity of humanity and stuff. I would assume that's the same priest he's talking about, the one that he was somewhat close to, I guess, the one who knew the truth about him, who, as we know, had his own secret, because him and the mortician were, they snuck off to kind of be together every once in a while. It's right, so he had his own secrets and stuff like that would have been heavily frowned upon, obviously, just like Philo. Philo's secret, stretches his, like, in the whole, like, how the public would respond to it. They wouldn't have been happy about the guy from the orphanage and the mortician. Obviously, like, Philo would get way more hate being half Fae. But yeah. And that's why I'm like, I don't know if that's just legitimately Philo's own consciousness, like him struggling with what he is, what he's done, and just everything spiraling at once, or is it more so like there is something purposeful, like screwing with his head? No one else can see it, but it's meant to be, only Philo being able to see it. So, but I brought it up before. Berwick came to him being like, yo, something's fishy about this, because he's bringing up a point I brought up that is like, yeah, it felt like this was all purposeful to kind of get the Berg and the Roe butting heads. Because it's like, hey, you had this murder that looks like it could have been a Pix's murder. Oh, here are these two Pix who were murdered to look like it was humans who did it. And now it's like, oh, here's a Fae that released a whole bunch of other Fae that are like causing havoc. And you murdered the Chancellor. And now it's just, because now things are heating up, like as Veer kind of puts it when he's talking to Millworthy later on. Yeah, like there was already a good chunk of people who hated the Fae. We definitely saw more anti-Fae in both seasons than we did ever see pro-Fae amongst people, but it's like, whereas like maybe it was like a more minority group that was like super, super hateful, now that's spread, whereas like more people, you probably find way more people antagonistic towards Fae. Like it's probably like increased like tenfold, because now most people are like that, and the few minority, if anyone at all, is pro-Fae, you know, so... But Berwick is like, yeah, it has to be all on purpose, because Philo did start thinking about it, because he was like, did they kill the Chancellor? Did they know that the Chancellor was here, like the Sparrows? But it's like, no, maybe it's just a coincidence. Came to free all the Fae, and just happened to come across the Chancellor. But now part of me's like, well, does this have something to do with Sophie? Are we going to find out? Well, because not unless that ends up coming up, not unless this Fae ends up taking on the form of Sophie or something like that. Like, that's how you kind of get Sophie back into the story, because this thing takes on her form or something. I don't know. Because that's why I felt like really, like, her ambitions were cut short like that. But it might be kind of a little bit of a, no, like, maybe no one can stop the plan she set in motion. I mean, it seemed like they were cut, but I'm like, once again, it's too purposeful. So either someone from the Pack side of things or New Dawn side of things is responsible. I feel like it had to be someone in the Berg. So that's why I'm like, is that actually Sophie? Was that a doppelganger? Did you use magic or something? I mean... Yeah, you don't know the full scale of what magic is like in this universe. I mean, the Sparrows is a shapeshifter itself, so it could easily be a thing of that wasn't Sophie that actually died. Or maybe it was, but maybe it was loyal to Sophie. Like, because once again, how would it know to strike now when the Chancellor's there? Like, why go after him specifically? It's like you knew to go after that. I mean, you were killing everyone there. You didn't kill Millworthy. You let him go. So, I mean, he was kind of tucked away in a corner. But part of me wonders, could it be a thing of, oh, you know exactly, you know that he's pro-Fae, so maybe it was working with Sophie? I don't know. Well, not unless because I was about to say, like, not unless we find out Nilly's actually the Sparrows, and maybe that's even more reason to kill Jonah, because it killed your best friend, Sophie. But it's like, we saw... the Sparrows we saw, Nilly's brother. But then you're like, not unless he's also a Sparrows in disguise as a Puck or something like that. Maybe they've both been laying low just because they're that rare. That's me freestyling, but I'm like, I don't know. Especially because Philo made a point of like, we have no idea who it could be, because these things are shapeshifters. But he's also saying, because once again, his thought is like, right, there is no grand conspiracy. There's nothing larger here. It's just, hey, the Sparrows has every reason to hate us. Men who were like Jonah, who were anti-Fae, which once again, he wasn't fully anti-Fae, but he kind of had that stance just because of everything. But also, he's like men like me who help keep the Fae down. So So later on when Don B's like, hey, help us find this monster and then you can get out of here. Or if you don't, you can stay locked up forever. And it's like, right. The other Philo's like, oh, tell them whatever they need to. Lie just so you can get out of here. And he's like, right, I'll help you. So we'll see where things kind of go on that front. On the other side of things, Vignette managed to get out, but obviously the row is ready to be burned, as we saw in Tourmaline's vision. So when the time comes, like obviously there's a Pix that got shot out of the sky and landed right on a barbed wire. I was like, Jesus. And she's trying to like keep hidden. She goes back to, I think, Philo's place. The cops rolled in, bashed the place up, didn't find her. She makes her way to Tourmaline, but she was like, oh yeah, I heard you in my head. So I don't know whether it's which I think is interesting, because I don't know if that's a very specific Pix thing, because Philo had that whole thing with Kane last episode, so I'm wondering if there's something there. And so it's like, oh, she gets informed about the Philo thing, which she's not too heartbroken about, because she's like, oh, it's Philo's the reason why I got arrested in the first place. I'm like, I hate that, because I'm like, that's kind of effed up that you put this all on Philo, because it's like, you also have to take responsibility for things kind of turning out the way they did. Like, you were so... but that's also the thing, like, how can I tell someone who's a part of a group that's been beaten down, killed for no reason, treated like garbage, turned into indentured servants, and now left to kind of rot and decay with no assistance in a part of the city? Like, how can I tell someone who's witnessed all that not to fight back and, you know, damn the consequences, because there are going to be consequences whether we do something or not. So it's like, how can I really push back against it? It's just, there's points on both sides, but it's like, I wish she could see that Philo is trying to do his best, but it just felt like you're just kind of like, oh, if you aren't 100% on our side, then you're that part of the enemy. But Philo's circumstances and Philo himself, there's a complicated nuance there. But it's also, you know, I'm also feel like I'm not saying I'm pro human or cops in this regard, because they've proven time and time again that they're shitty, and it's kind of like, do you really deserve to be saved? But it's just, it's a complicated thing. It's not so black and white. In some regards. In other regards, once again, like the face treatment being beaten down to what they are and treated away, it's kind of a no, but the response to it's like, once again, where do you want to, do you want to go the more Martin Luther King Jr. route? Do you want to go more the Malcolm X route? That, no violence at all. It's all about peace, non-violent like protests and stuff like that, where it's just kind of like, all right, they want to hit, we can hit back harder type of, mentality would be more Malcolm X esque. So yeah, like I said, there's a it's not so clear cut on all fronts. Like I said, on some it's more so than others, but nevertheless, you have Vignette wanting to leave, and she wants to take Tourmaline with her, because it's like, hey, I love you, but like Tourmaline's like, I love you too, but I know you, Vignette. You're only acting like this now. You're saying all this now because you're not going to mean it when it all comes down to it, because you'll mean it now and you have the best intentions, but you are flip-floppy. You'll always find someone else or another cause to be so important, Because she's saying, like, right, she regrets ever... When Tourmaline asked her to run away back in Tirnanok all those years ago, it's like, I should have left with you. I shouldn't have let Philo get in the middle of us. She still also doesn't know, because at the end of the day, it's still on Philo for making the choice. But I'm surprised that still hasn't come up, where like Tourmaline's like, I have to admit, I'm the one that told Philo he should. I mean, granted, it's like, she even told Philo last season, it's like, I didn't tell you to like fake your death for all those years, but it's like, yeah, it's still the thing of, you're the one that told him. It's like, right, if you want her to live, you need to stay as far away from her, let her go, because she will die for you. So don't put her in a situation where she has a choice or an opportunity to die for you, right? So that still hasn't come up, and I don't think maybe they just feel like storytelling-wise, it's not important enough to, because it's not like that would swing Vignette closer to Philo. It just make her pissed at both Philo and Tourmaline, rather than giving her the choice. Both of you kind of make decisions for me. So I think Vignette would kind of have that type of, response to that knowledge. But for Tourmaline, it's like, I will always come after something or someone else, because what happened, like, you got caught up in Philo, and then like the Black Ravens, like, you keep finding these other causes. I'd kind of come, I'm like last in your mind when it comes to the people that's important to you. And so the Ravens do show up And when they do, they want Vignette. It's like, right, we can take this opportunity with everything that's going on in the Berg. You know, we could use this opportunity to our advantage, but Vignette doesn't want to be a part of that because for her, it's like, no, I got something important to do. I got to look after someone I made a promise to, which Tourmaline enjoys that. But you had that look from Darius because he had that whole conversation with her where it's like, right, you ruined Philo's life and now are you going to do the same thing to Tourmaline, you know? And so for him, it's just like, he's like, I'm trying to see why so many people like Tourmaline and Philo bend over backwards to you, because for Darius, it's almost like you're not worth it. Like, what's so special about you that makes these people so willing to turn their lives upside down, destroy themselves for you? Because all that Tourmaline put herself through with her sight and everything last episode just to know Vignette was okay. Philo went through so much to save you, but for her, as she looked at it, it's like, oh, well, he's coming to save me, kind of like, oh, just so he can make himself feel better. It's like, no, it's because he loves you, you know? He cares about you. But for Vignette, she's so pissed at him right now that I think she's got blinders on because of that, and so she's so focused on that hate, you know? It's just, she's not even really worried or even thinking about Philo right now. I think that's what bothers Darius. It's like, cool, you're running away with Tourmaline, which I think he likes Tourmaline. But also it's like, yeah, my buddy's left to rot in that prison he tried to help you escape from. So then there's the whole situation with the Berg government being like, yeah, the chancellor's gone. We need someone like you, Millworthy, someone that can be trusted. And he's like, yeah, I appreciate the offer, gentlemen, but as I've learned from theater, you got to learn when to take your bow. I'm taking my bow. I'm bouncing. But Veer's the one that convinced him to stay because it's like, hey, what's happening on the row? What happens when a good man does nothing? You know. And Millworthy's like, yes, I do know. And I guess that's maybe a combination of maybe like if he had made moves sooner with the Philo thing, if he had let that kind of play out. Once again, that kind of wasn't 100% on him. Vignette kind of put a kibosh on that, her and the Black Ravens. But, or maybe it's other elements, like maybe it's something with like Ashling, like maybe all of that makes him go like, oh, I should have handled that different. I'm curious because like, doing nothing, maybe he's thinking like, this could be my opportunity. This might be the opportunity to kind of quell all this. I mean, the whole point was like getting Jonah knocked off of his position, and now that position is vacant. There's no Sophie to fill that void, and I think there's no using Philo in this regard because no one's going to follow him because he's half Fae, but he might be the key to all this. I don't know how Millworthy's going to handle this all. Maybe for him it's like the best thing I can do is take up this position, but that might just be what Vera wants to help the whole pack situation, because that's the whole point of like, oh yeah, we had all your charges dropped because you were someone who was always pro like helping like foster this friendship between the Berg and the pact. And it's like, yeah, the demonic tyranny of Jonah. And it's like, okay, so that's how we're spinning this now, even though y'all are kind of all on his side, but okay. So we'll have to wait to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episodes. It's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens next. It's so interesting because I do believe this season, do correct me if I'm wrong, because I was looking on IMDb and like, I think because I saw like some of the actors are in 18 episodes and I'm like, oh, okay, so this season's 10 episodes. It's supposed to be the final season and everything. So I'm like, are we really going to wrap everything up in 4 more episodes? Because like, yeah, it's like Civil War situations because like Veer made the whole point of like, hey, I don't want our allies while we're going through a civil war, you know, the Pat versus New Dawn. Last thing we want is the Berg having to deal with its own civil war. But once again, it all seems purposeful. Maybe it's meant to be a full-blown collision between all 4 sides, like the Pack and the New Dawn, while the Berg and the Roe go toe and toe. But it's like, the fact is, these 2 nations that are at war with each other happen to be going through civil wars of their own. To some, at least it's leaning that way, it's heading that way in the Berg. But obviously, the Pact and New Dawn are like full blown going to a civil war. But I'm like, it all has to be connected. I'm just so curious to see the thread that kind of. Because obviously the Pact and New Dawn stuff, it's connected to the Berg on the like armament standpoint, but it still kind of feels like such a separate thing. Obviously it's like tied into the Agreus and Imogen thing, but that's part of their story. I don't know how that will necessarily, I mean, aside from just like the whole Romeo and Juliet-esque element that's happening with Vignette and Philo, which that's in a rocky spot right now. Other than those elements, like those, that's an overarching like social thing in this universe that those both sides of those love stories play into. But whether they kind of connect these two countries' civil wars, storylines, and everything going on in Berg, we'll have to wait and see. I'm so curious. Is this season actually longer than I think it is? I have no idea. Maybe it is. I can't always be trusty of like IMDb because like sometimes stuff gets added later. I'm like, oh, I thought this was a certain amount of episode. Oh, nope. This shows that there's actually more episodes than I thought was. So we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.